Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. We are so glad to see so many of you here. We're going to get started in just a minute. I just want to go over a few housekeeping things. I know some of you have heard and seen these about 27 times this week, so we won't take too long. Make sure you mute yourself unless you're talking, asking a question. That will just help everybody hear the presentation. You need to be logged into Teams if you want to access the chat. The best way we found to do this is to log in through Blackboard and then click on the Get Office 365 link on the right side. It looks like most of you are logged into Teams, so if you don't have access to chat, Natalie's working to add everybody to the team. But if you can't chat, that's okay. You can raise your hand to ask a question, or at the end, we'll have time for questions and you can just unmute yourself and ask. And if questions persist after the session is over, you're welcome to send any one of us an email. We will send you a link for attendance toward the end of the session. And again, if you don't have access to the chat, just email me, Natalie, or Misty, and we will email you the link to the sign-in sheet. So we want to make sure everyone gets credit for attending. And the last thing to let you know is we will be monitoring the team all semester. You've all been made members of this team, and we will be working all semester to answer questions and work with folks who have questions about online teaching or using any of the tools or the practices that we talk about in our sessions. So this is not one and done. We're here to support your work all semester long. So I'm going to start the presentation, maybe. Here we go. All right, you should see.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Should we hit, do you want to record it or?
It is being recorded.
Okay, I just wanted to know if I was being recorded.
I don't know who hit record, but it's being recorded.
I hit record. Please don't say anything controversial, please.
Are you talking to Allegra?
Yes, he is.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Allegra. That's me with the purple hair. I teach English for TCC Connect. I've taught online for 6 or 7 years, and I am the department chair for English and Humanities.
And I'm next to Allegra, Natalie Russell, and I teach biology at Connect, and I've been there about 3 years, and before that I was an adjunct at the Northeast campus.
And I'm Misty Wilson-Mertens. I teach history. I'm the department chair for social sciences, and I've been teaching online for about 8 years.
She's the pro. Ask her all the questions. So the first thing we want you to do is a little thought experiment here. You don't have to tell us your answer, but I want you to think of a time when you wanted someone else to be reasonable. When you thought to yourself, come on, man, just be reasonable. What were you really asking them to be? My guess is you were asking them to be flexible, to be understanding, to relate to you as a human. My guess is that you were asking them to put themselves in your shoes and to maybe make an exception or even to just see something from your point of view. And that's what we do for our students when we create policies that are rigorous but also reasonable. And in fact, on the first day of on the first day of class, I tell my students, one thing I promise is that I will be a reasonable person.
So I also want to continue with that and think about in your everyday work, things or in your life, things that happen to you that are unintentional and you still did a lot of good work or you're making a lot of effort. Like, for example, let's say that you work on a document. Maybe you made a video for a class or you're working on an assignment and you're going to share that with some of your colleagues and you send them an email, you're going to attach that, but you forgot to attach the file. So it's simple for your colleague to just write you back and say, hey, you forgot to send that attachment. You can follow up with the attachment. All of the work that you put into that is still valuable. They still get to use that. The fact that you just forgot to attach that file isn't really the biggest issue. Same thing about, I'm sure all of us have been late a day or two once in a while with, let's say, our water bill or our electric bill, but we didn't expect that the water company or the electric company were going to cut our utilities off, after 24 hours of being late. So what we want to talk about in this is you can still be flexible without lowering the academic rigor of your course. So it's not about being mean or nice. It's just about being human, but still maintaining your academic standards.
So the place to really start with this is how you communicate to your students. For most of us, the biggest way that we communicate is going to be announcements. And as we go through there, I want to really talk about how your tone comes across in announcements, because what may seem just like a sentence to you is going to come off very harsh to some of your students. And also how you approach them when you answer questions that they ask you. All right, so this is our first example. So this is about discussion boards, an announcement posted in class. I'm not going to read it to you guys because you'll have advanced degrees and you can read. But I do want to point out to you the use of all capital letters right here, and then where it says this is a college class. To your students, when you do this, you are yelling at them. They've grown up online. They live in an online world. All caps, exclamation mark, you're yelling.
And just as a side note, this is also just like condescending. You should have learned it in elementary school. Did you even read the instructions?
Right. So let's take the same example, but do it in a better way. Allegra?
I'm doing
it. So this is an example of Natalie's announcement, and it's the same information. She's trying to get to the same place, but she's doing it in a nicer way. That first announcement that got sent out, I don't want to work hard for that instructor. I think anything I do is not going to be good enough. I'm not even going to try. I might drop the course. But this way makes me want to try to reach her expectations. She's giving specific things people can do to improve, where they can go to get help if they need it. This is what we should be striving for, because you're going to make your students reach that level that you want them to reach, and you're going to support them in doing that. Can we move forward one more, Allegra? So this is a announcement from Allegra's class. Allegra, do you want to talk about this one?
I heard you laugh at my announcement, Misty. That didn't escape me.
Sorry, I couldn't mute fast enough.
So I use announcements for a lot of things in my classes. I make sure that students are aware of what we're doing and on track. I give them reminders. I reach out to them. I give them advice on upcoming assignments, and I do put little funny pictures in my announcements. It softens the blow if I have to say, don't forget you have a research paper due tomorrow. So if I get questions several times from students, I will just post an announcement that answers it to everybody. Because if a couple students have the question, then maybe my instructions weren't super clear. And I do everything I can to be as pleasant and engaging as I can in announcements. And even when I have something a little harsher to say, like I see a lot of us missed a deadline, then I'm going to find a way to say it that is encouraging instead of demeaning. And that can be hard. My focus is always on what you should do and not on what you shouldn't do. So instead of saying, never do this and stop doing this, I say, always do this and remember to do this. So instead of saying you should have learned how to capitalize I in elementary school, I might say something like, remember to check your capitalization before you turn it in.
And you should be sending announcements fairly frequently. I send announcements at least once a week, most of the time more than that. And you don't want to treat your announcements like a flash sale. It's not up from 1 to 3, and if you missed it, you missed it. Put them up and leave them up for the whole semester. Announcements are also a great place to get into some more difficult content, to teach a little bit more deeply than you have in your content lessons, or to reteach. So this is an example from my class, and you'll notice I don't use a bunch of happy pictures because that's just not my personality. But it's still a positive tone, it's still encouraging, it's still uplifting. But in this particular project, I had A's and B's, and then I had dismal failures. There was no middle ground. So that tells me that I probably didn't explain what they were trying to do very well. So if you see in the red box, this is me re-explaining in a new way what they need to do and giving them a chance to resubmit. Because if that many people didn't understand, then that's something I did wrong, not something they did wrong.
Misty, are you saying you're willing to admit you've done something wrong?
Always.
So these are just some examples of student emails, and you will get these slides, so don't feel like you have to read every word that's on the screen while we're talking. But we just want to emphasize that it's really important the way you respond to students in an email. We know you might get 15 emails in a day, and so your impulse might be to send one-line responses just to get information to students as quickly as possible. But it's a much better idea to take a little bit of extra time and add what you might call fluff, but it does help students feel like it was okay to email you, and it makes them more likely to reach out with questions in the future. So even when they ask me a question like that's answered in the syllabus, I don't send back the sentence, "It's in the syllabus." I say, "That's a great question. I'm glad you're thinking about that. You'll find that in the syllabus, but after you read it, if you still have more questions, let me know." I'm still telling them to go read the syllabus. I'm not babying them, but I am saying it in a little bit of a nicer way. I want you to imagine if you asked your department chair a question and all they wrote back was, "It's in the faculty handbook." Probably wouldn't make you feel very good about yourself either. So I always try to start most emails with "thank you" or "great question." And sometimes I do make mistakes. So I say, "I forgot to do that, and thanks for letting me know, and I have fixed whatever was the issue." So your course policies help set the tone for your class, and Misty's going to explain that because my dog is growling and I'm going to kick him out of my office.
Awesome. So really having these policies up front in your syllabus early on in announcements, it's just going to save you so much time and work later on. So really the places that you want to make sure that you're setting your standards and you're going to abide by them are with your attendance, your late work policy, how you want them to conduct their discussion boards, whether you're going to offer extra credit and how you're going to do it, and then in academic integrity, making sure they're not cheating. These are all standards that we should have in our course, but they could be different standards. So we're not telling you there is a one and only right way to do it. We're saying think through your policies and make them intentional and make sure your policies are achieving the goal you want to achieve, not just that you're setting policies to be the authority in the room.
And the other thing that I didn't mention at the beginning is your course policies might look very different for an online class than for a face-to-face class, because you have certain restrictions for a face-to-face class. You have that room that you meet in for a designated period of time, and you can't stay late if you want to because there's somebody else using that room. So you have some flexibility available to you because you have an online class that you really don't have available to you in a face-to-face class.
So the first thing we want to talk about is attendance, and most important to remember is that you have to take attendance. If you have a technical question about how to do that in WebAdvisor, we will post a link to the video that we have in YouTube that shows you how to do that. If Austin's still here, he can post the link. It's very easy once you know how to do it, but you do have to figure out how to add the days that you're taking attendance for and then go in and mark people present or absent. But you have to take attendance, but it's up to you what you count for it and how often you do it. And all three of us do it a little bit differently. I take attendance on Tuesdays, and if students have submitted something in the past 7 days, then I count them present.
So I do it on Sundays, which is the end of the week for me. And it's the same thing. If you've submitted any assignment or discussion in my class, you get credit for that week.
Yes, I'm very similar. I take it so in a 16-week class, once per week. In the summer, I do it based on the lesson. So if they've turned in the assignments for that lesson, they're present. In the way I do it, even though we'll talk later about late work, even if I accept something late, if they didn't turn it in on time, I still mark them as absent because they didn't have it in by the designated time.
So Ariel's asked a question here, is it better to do it for any assignment or to have a specific weekly assignment? You can do whichever one you want, just make sure it's clear in how you're doing it. So for me, the reason I do it as any assignment is I have my gradebook grouped by week. So it's very easy for me to say, oh, you turned in something this week, you're present.
The important thing is that you take attendance and that you tell students how you take attendance. And the financial aid requirements are that they do something meaningful and academic. So that could be sending you an email to ask a question, posting in the discussion board, submitting an assignment, working with a peer, providing feedback to someone else, submitting a draft. Any of those things in an online class are academic and active. And, oh, I went the wrong way. I went the way wrong way.
Ashley, yes, you can. And Austin's going to get us that video, I think. You can amend your attendance to just be weekly. If you were assigned an online class from the very beginning, you actually have to go in and create your own dates.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing, Allegra, is about dropping. I don't know if you were about to say that, but I think the three of us have different policies about whether or not we drop students. So I do tell mine in my attendance that they may be dropped for non-participation. So I think, I'm not sure what you guys do.
I will never drop a student for any reason. I would rather give a student an F than drop them because they only get so many drops and I don't want to take away one from them that they may need for a math or science class.
I don't drop them because I just count them absent and send them a lot of emails. And it honestly never occurred to me to go in and drop them. So it's just a matter of policy. I never did it in face-to-face classes. I didn't drop students. But again, the point is, if you are in alignment with college policy and what you're going to do is clearly communicated in your syllabus and your ICR, then you can choose to drop students or not. I would say that if your choice is to drop them after 1 week or after a single assignment isn't submitted, you might want to rethink that, only because we tend to have a lot of students who come back and say, I was 2 days late submitting this discussion board and I got dropped. I can obviously still pass the class, and then it takes a long time to get a student put back into a class. So if you're going to drop them, it should be after a period of no activity in the class. So sometimes you'll be in the third week of class and you can see in the grade book that a student has never logged in. That's different than missing one assignment.
Right. My policy is after 2 major exams. So they get plenty of time to participate.
Mm-hmm. And it says it right next to their name in the grade book, when is the last time they logged in? And if it was 3 weeks ago, then they're probably not active in the course, especially if they haven't reached out to you. So we're going to talk about late work, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. And the important thing to remember here is that the three of us have different policies and you don't have to adopt any of ours, but obviously I think mine is the best. So it's important to have a consistent policy, to word it very well, very clearly, and to not make exceptions. And that doesn't mean don't allow late work, because I absolutely allow late work. My job is to teach students English and writing and how to support a thesis. My job is not to police deadlines. That's not part of the district master syllabus. Nowhere on there does it say the student will learn how to submit things by midnight or else. So I do accept late work. And what I tell my students is right here on the screen. If you need an extra day, take it. I don't need a doctor's note. I don't need details. I don't need verification or documentation. I just will give you an extra day. And in fact, things are due on Mondays, and every Monday I post an announcement that says, here's a reminder, this is due today. I will take it for full credit through tomorrow. And I do it that way because if you're going to give an exception to a student who asks for it, but your policy says, I don't take late work, then really you're just giving preferential treatment to students who are brave enough to ask for exceptions. And I know many students who have have difficult circumstances, but if the policy says no late work, they would never dare ask. So if you plan to make exceptions for students, which you probably should during a global pandemic, then you probably don't want a policy that says you don't make exceptions. Because again, all you're doing is giving preferential treatment to students who are bold and confident enough to ask. It costs me absolutely nothing to say it's due today, but I'll take it through tomorrow for extra credit. Especially since I'm probably not going to start grading them the moment that they are due on Monday night. I also let my students work ahead, and that is very helpful for many students. I don't open the whole course on the first day, but I do let them work ahead by a week or two. If you don't have to work this week, but you have to work every day next week, it just makes more sense that you want to work ahead in our class. And there's no reason for me not to let students do that. I do tell them I can't take the final exam late because it's due the last day of class. There's no wiggle room on that. I don't know if Natalie or Misty wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I do. Do we have another screenshot on the next slide or not on late work?
The next slide is mine.
Okay, then I do want to talk about my late work policy. So I think mine, let's see, yes, that's mine on the left. So what I do is I have a no late work for exams. However, every student gets one oops ticket or whatever you want to call it. And whatever reason, they can take that exam up to 3 days late. I don't need a doctor's note. It may just be that they forgot about it. It doesn't matter to me. They get one chance to make that up. The rest of the assignments, so the discussion boards, the lecture assignments, the quizzes, all of those, I will take 3 days late, but I do take off 10% for each day up to 3 days late. And I realize that means it's a little more work on my part on the grading, but I do like giving the student who has their work in on time some benefit to getting it in on time. So that's why I do the point deduction for them turning it in a little bit late.
And I probably have the strictest policy because I don't take makeup work at all. I don't take any late work. Now, the reason for that is I have other things students can do to make up for those assignments. I have some extra credit options they can do. I have some things they can participate in that will basically erase a week or maybe even 2 weeks. But I need them in my class so we can work on the assignments as a group and for the discussion boards to have participation. So again, I don't take late work, but I have a way for them to fix it if something came up and something happens.
And that's really what is at the heart of all of these policies, whether you give them an oops or whether you give them an extra day or whether you give them opportunities to drop something or make something up or earn extra credit. The point is, if they have something happen or if they just make an honest mistake, it's not a fatal error. We want to not make the focus of our jobs pushing students out to prove a point. So it doesn't matter which one of these policies, they're all different. They all work well for each of us, but we're giving students an option to make sure that they can be successful.
I'm just going to answer one question in the chat. Someone asked how I keep track of who's used their oops and who hasn't. So I'm a little bit old school, so I still print out a roster, when at the start of the semester. So I just keep it at my desk. So then I can, as a student uses their oops, or I may have other things that I'm, if they have an SAR, something that I need to remember, that's sort of my master list to keep track of all of those things, including who's used their oops ticket. That's a good question.
And that's actually a good policy to have a printed roster or something that you have them keep track of, because some students go by something other than the name that shows up in Blackboard. Blackboard doesn't let students change the name that shows up. It's just their legal name. So if somebody goes by their middle name or something else, or if you want to remember that they have an SAR accommodation or anything of that nature, it's helpful to have a roster to refer to when you're emailing them. And this on the screen is just an example of an announcement I sent the day that something is due, and it says I'll still accept it through tomorrow for full credit. Again, that doesn't really cost me anything because I'm not going to start grading them until tomorrow anyway. So that just gives students extra time in case they've been working as they should have been and something came up that was unavoidable for them. And that's going to happen a lot. Students have their kids at home and lots of things are going to come up that they couldn't really avoid. So even if I wanted the due date to be Monday, I set it as Sunday and then give them an extra day. And that helps students out a lot.
And one thing to say about whatever you decide to do for your policy, just make sure that you use the Blackboard settings to help you and the student. So since I know that I'm going to allow students to have an oops, and my deadline for the exam is at 11:59 p.m., I'm not going to be up at 11:59 in case a student emails me and says, "Ooh, at 2 in the morning, I forgot I'm going to take it now." So I allow them, in other words, I don't check that box that says don't allow students to start the exam after the due date, because I'm going to have to decide whether to accept that test and grade it or not. So I go ahead and leave it open, and then I can communicate with the student after. But if I check that box that says don't let students turn this in late, then they have to communicate with me first and ask, can I use my oops ticket? Then I have to turn it back on, and it's just a lot more work on my part. So I would just say think about your Blackboard settings so that it makes it easier on you and the students to work with your policy.
And a policy that you absolutely need to have is a policy on discussion board etiquette. It should be clear and proactive, and you should emphasize it in your syllabus and your course intro and your first announcements. This policy is actually Misty's, so.
So you just want to, again, set the standards early, make sure they all abide by it. What I think is really important for instructors to remember is that discussion boards don't just exist out in the world without you monitoring them. If you just leave a discussion board up and you never check it and you're never there with your students, it can catch on fire real fast, especially depending on which courses you're teaching or what subjects you're talking about. So I highly, highly, highly recommend you're proactive and you're in your discussion boards with your students. Also, by being in there with them, you're modeling the kind of responses that you want to see. So I want them to cite sources in their discussions. So when I'm in, I will cite my sources. I'll use APA citation format. I really want them to understand that this is the kind of discussion I want. And the more that you do that, the more you're going to get away from those posts that say, I agree. Or you are so smart for thinking this. This is exactly what I thought too. That's not really a discussion. And we want to move beyond that.
Good job, Misty. See, I was doing the comment. So if you want to look at some policies, you have access to every ICR that's posted at TCC. So if you want to see Misty's syllabus or mine or Natalie's or anyone's, you absolutely can see them. But most people who teach online have a policy that's very clear and explicit about expectations for the discussion board. And again, it's just as Misty said, there's two parts. One is being professional and respectful, and the other part is actually engaging in the discussion in a meaningful way. And one way you can do that is to post some responses yourself so students have a model that they can follow. We're going to talk about extra credit, and I know that some of you have very strong feelings about extra credit. My policy is on the bottom here. We have live webinars related to civic engagement and information literacy, and so attending those gets students extra credit. And my class extra credit is making up for a daily grade, like a discussion board or journal entry, their lowest grade. So if they forget something or if they just really mess it up, then they can replace that grade by attending the webinar and filling out the survey at the end. Natalie, what's your extra credit?
So mine is at the top, and my philosophy is I want them to earn the extra credit during the semester in a way that helps them, get the material better in the class or take something away from the class. I don't want it to be at the very end of the semester where you get those emails that say, oh, I really need this grade. What can I do? So I let them know up front, you will have 2 opportunities. My course has 1,000 points, and that's about 20 points. So it's not going to make a huge difference, but it will help them if they bombed a test. And I work those into the course during the semester so they know this is their opportunity and they don't ask toward the end of the class. And I try to use these opportunities to help them engage in the material. One thing, I don't know if Misty wants to talk. Oh, yep. Go ahead.
So we do encourage extra credit as one of those ways to be flexible. So you could drop a low grade, you could give extra credit, you could give an oops, but just some flexibility that you build into your course. It's important to remember that you have to consider what makes the most sense for your class, to clearly explain it, because students, some students who are very grade conscious have some anxiety about how it shows up in the grade book and when it shows up in the grade book and how it gets calculated. So just explain it clearly. Give them a couple of options. If you only let them do one live event for extra credit, that can be kind of problematic for some students, and make it relevant. So don't give them extra credit, for going trick-or-treating. Give them some extra credit that relates to your course or is relevant in some way and is meaningful. You want to avoid things that are exclusionary. So all of these are well-intentioned, but if you give extra credit for giving blood or voting or donating to a charity or buying a book and reading it, those are things that not all students can participate in, right? Not all students can give blood. Not all students are eligible to vote. Not all students have extra discretionary money to spend. So you can make those among the many options that you have for extra credit, but you want to be sure that you're not giving extra credit only to some students. So if you wanted to do civic engagement, you could have voting, helping others register to vote, providing transportation to polls, or participating in some other civic engagement things. All of those would be valid, and that gives students some options. You also want to avoid excessive extra credit. If I can skip 2 tests and still make a good grade by doing all the extra credit, it's probably too much extra credit. So students, the bulk of their grade should still come from the coursework. And you also have to have a policy in your course for academic integrity. And these look different. So this is mine. I teach English. I don't have any tests, so I don't use Proctorio. I don't have any multiple choice quizzes or exams. So my plagiarism policy my academic integrity policy is really about plagiarism. Our campus has a really great dean, and she let us add a policy of self-plagiarism to the campus policy, and that's because we have course shells. So all the 1301, English 1301 courses are identical, and they have the same assignments. So if you failed it last semester or you dropped it last semester and you're retaking it, then students try to submit the same assignment again. And so we want to be very explicit that that is against our policy. So this is our campus policy, and I can show you how to navigate to it in Blackboard if you want to copy it. But that's plagiarism. But of course, Natalie has a proctorial policy in her class. If you want to explain that.
I absolutely will. So the great thing about Proctorio is it does have a lot of different settings so that you can set those settings to work for you in your course. One thing that I would say about Proctorio, there's always the potential to have technical issues. So on the student side, so try to be very clear in your instructions that you give to students. But even with that, there's going to be times where they lose their internet access or there's, something happens in the middle of their exam. And so if you can work in a test pool, so it's not the same, 50 questions every time, because not really often, but at least 2 or 3 times a semester, I'll have a student who just got started. Maybe they saw 4 or 5 questions, and then there was an internet issue or a power issue or something happened and they were knocked out of the test. So because I know the likelihood that they're going to get the same questions again is very low, then I feel okay about, erasing that attempt and giving them another attempt to take the test. I also, because I used to do this on campus, let them have a note card, one note card that they can use for taking the exam. But I tell them up front, you have to show me your desk area with the webcam at the beginning. You have to show me your card, because I know that on camera, when I'm viewing the video, they're going to be looking down at their note card, and I need to know that there's nothing else on the desk area that they're looking at. So students need explicit instructions to know what to do, and they might need reminders, but proctorial is certainly better than not having a proctoring service, I believe.
Okay. So we've been talking about this a little bit, and so we want to just be explicit here. You want to build flexibility into your online course in a way that maybe you couldn't do in your in-person course. And you certainly don't want to or don't have to do all of these things, but you want to consider which of these things works best for you and your students. You might drop the lowest grade. Misty, you drop a test grade, is that right?
In some courses, yes.
How do you decide which courses?
Well, because History 1 and 2 are freshman level, and then Western Civ and Texas are sophomore level. So freshman level, I drop a grade. Sophomore level, I do other things.
Okay. So why do you drop a test grade?
I think anybody can have one bad day. Your cat gets sick, your car breaks down, you just had a terrible day and you completely bombed one test. That's happened to all of us. So that's your grace period. Now, if it happens twice, there's something else going on. It's not just 2 bad days.
So you drop a test, which means if I totally mess something up or totally just had a terrible day, then it's not a fatal flaw, right?
Exactly.
Marius has a good policy, which is he has a comprehensive final that students can use to substitute for a missing test earlier in the course. And if I mischaracterize that, let me know. I open things early and that gives students extra time. So there's a lot of reading in my English class, and some students know that they are not fast readers and they want extra time. So they have extra time built in to read ahead or to have extra advance notice of when there's going to be a lot of reading coming up. Natalie has the OOPS ticket, which is exactly what it sounds like. You get a virtual ticket, right? You don't have a paper ticket.
I don't, but maybe I could make one.
Yeah.
Maybe you can make me one in Canva, a virtual one.
Gosh, I could make you one. Some people let students rewrite their papers. This is especially important in the first, in Comp 1 in English or History 1301, which could be a student's first foray into college. Letting students redo it if they just totally missed what the assignment was supposed to be, or they had just some big errors. They're going to learn more from making a mistake and redoing it than they would have learned from getting a bad grade and feeling totally destroyed by it. I think Terrell has a question.
No, it's not a question, it's a comment. In the face-to-face class, I teach speech. My first test covers some fairly thick information, and they don't do as well on that first test as they think they will. So what I've done is I put on my let's make a good deal suit. And I look at them and I say, look at you guys, I'm real disappointed, but I know you can do better. I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. You do better on the second test, I'll give you that grade for the first test also. And my experience is that on the second test, they come within 3-4 points of the first. It's not like I'm giving away the farm or anything, but I think it does kind of encourage them to, hey, boy, I've got a chance in the second test to pull my grade up. And so I use it. And it's just a suggestion.
No, it's a great one. Absolutely. And those students who are really trying their best and made a mistake, it will encourage them to work even harder in advance of that second test. And that's what you want them to do, is work hard and take it seriously. And so policies that encourage students to do that over policies that are just there to enforce arbitrary rules, I think are much more successful. The other thing that you can do is to host optional meetings for your students. Natalie has review sessions, is that right?
Right. And Since we don't have a specific meeting time, they are optional. I try to vary them different days of the week, different times, but I give the schedule at the very beginning of the semester, during that week that they're going to have an exam, and I will record those. So right now I'm doing it in Collaborate, which is okay, but I do record those and then download the file, I'll post it to YouTube to make sure that it gets captioned and share that with those who couldn't make it. But I look forward to trying out Teams maybe in the fall to do that same thing. But yes, I have a lot of students who, even though it's an online class and everything is there, they just enjoy having the opportunity to have that time to have interchange online.
And I use Google Meet instead of Blackboard Collaborate. Students all have Gmail accounts, so they can get into Google Meet and we can validate their identity. And Google's a little bit easier for students to use just because they're used to Google tools. So if you want to explore Google Meet, if you just open your MyTCC Gmail account, there's a link on the left that says Google Meet, and you can set up a meeting. It works just like Skype and Zoom and Teams and all of the rest, but it's built into Gmail, so it's easy for students to access. So now is your time to ask us questions. And I will, as you guys ask some other questions, open my course so I can, there's been a couple people asking about how I put those Bitmojis in. So I will work on that. But what other questions do we have about anything that we've talked about?
Allegra, one of the questions is about asynchronous and synchronous meeting times and the pros and cons of that. You might want to, Richard Ruiz is asking that, so you might want to address that.
So if you wanted to have an asynchronous meeting, you could, but you couldn't make it required because we can't presume that students will all be available at a specific time. So you can have a synchronous meeting and you can have a synchronous meeting and then record it if you do it in Teams, if you do it anywhere else and Collaborate, you record it and put it in YouTube and make sure that students have access to it later. Can you not see my screen, Christina?
I think it's my fault, Allegra, because I turned off other people's cameras so that way we could go back to your screen, but then that disappeared. So I apologize. That was my fault.
No, you're good. You're good. So if you're going to have a synchronous meeting, you just have to record it and then post the recording on YouTube. Google Meet is an in-network tool because we have Gmail accounts through TCC. And if there is an update on not being able to use it, no one has told me. So, but it is required that you use a TCC in-network tool. So you can't, for instance, use Zoom with your students because there is no way to validate their identity in Zoom. You're just basically having a class meeting and anybody could be in there. So it does need to be something that requires them to sign in with their TCC credentials, which would be Blackboard Collaborate, Teams, or as far as I know, Google Meet. So I will show you how I make those announcements. If you have other questions though, feel free to ask.
Well, my question is, what are the unintended consequences of having a late policy that does a score reduction per day late? Is there any, or is that just, I mean,
it makes your life harder.
Oh, okay. But I actually use software where it automatically does it because I use the
accounting lab.
Yeah. Well, except it's McGraw-Hill's. Yeah. Connect.
I don't think as long as that policy is clearly communicated to students, then I don't think there is a major downside I mean, Natalie, that's your policy as well, right? Do you?
It is, yes. So it is more work, I mean, just to remember, but, I try to grade everything. I try to stay up to date. So if something's turned in late, then I can see, everything else has been graded. And then I just look at the day it was due. And so it's a little more work, but to me, it's a little more forgiving than just giving them a 0.
Mm-hmm.
You could also drop the lowest 1 or 2 if you have 16 quizzes, and that might be easier to keep track of because you can just build that into your grade calculation, and you don't have to worry about keeping track of that.
Hey, Natalie, in the question, somebody asked how long you spend in your review sessions.
So I used to just do one session before each exam, and it would go like an hour and a half or hour and 45 minutes. That's too long for me. It's too long for them. So now I try to break them up to keep them under an hour, because I just, think that at that point they've gotten tired of it, and so have I.
So I think the question was, how do I align the emojis in my...
Yes, I would like to know that too.
So I just have a dummy announcement here, and I click on this little mountain image. So I'm going to answer that Google Meet question in just a second. Dr. Blankenbaker is not wrong. So if you click on this little mountain image and you browse my computer, you find whichever Bitmoji you want to put up. If your question is how to get to Bitmojis, then you have to come to the 11 o'clock session, and I will explain it. You put in your alt text, which describes what the image is for students who have visually impaired. And then you insert the image. I right click on it, and then I just move it over to the right. You can also center it.
And your text, see mine, it leaves a big space between my text when I do that. When you right click.
So if you go in here to image and appearance, you can just say horizontal space for, vertical space for, and then you would just type where, I mean, it looks exactly like.
Okay, I'll try that. I will try it.
So it is absolutely true that you cannot use out-of-network tools, but again, Google is a network tool. We have Google accounts. So if you are using your MyTCC account and you are requiring students to log in using their MyTCC account, it is a network tool. But I will
you bring your email up?
Google.
Will you bring, well, I guess you can't bring your email up, but there is a Meet right there on your, if you look at your email, there's.
I'll bring up a different Gmail.
There's a Meet, and it says start a meeting, join a meeting right there in your MyTCC email.
Can I, this idea though that they have to log in through their TCC account, and so then we're verifying them. I mean, how do we not run into the same problems that we've run into here with Teams, where people are logging in as guests because they're signed in through the wrong account? Would you then tell the students that they're not allowed, that they need to sign out? Like, do you not allow them in?
So okay, so you can post, this is separate from a Google Classroom question because we don't have Google Classroom, but yes, you can make it so that it is that the only people who can log into a meeting are using my.tccd.edu email accounts. But I'm also
so then those other students would just get like an error account or an error message, like that they didn't have permission to join because they like I have like 5 Gmail accounts, for example. So if I was somehow logged into the wrong one and I tried to go in, I'd just get an error message.
I will test it and find out.
Okay, thank you.
I can tell you that as the head of the Elite District Technology team, I will find an answer to this question very quickly. But if you are in your Gmail, which this is my personal Gmail, so you're going to see random stuff, but at least I'm not going to violate FERPA. There is right over here is a thing that says start a meeting, join a meeting. And if I say start a meeting, it's that easy to start it. And I can switch which Google account I'm in. I can make myself a presenter. I can share this link with students. And if I go through my Google Calendar, then I can set it up for a future date. So this is my TCC Google Calendar. And if that's not the future. I don't know what day it is, everyone. So if I open this on the July 15th, I can add a Google Meet video conference. So you can do it in the future. I will find out about Google Classroom. I don't know why you wouldn't be able to use it, but I will find out. Oh, yeah, Classroom's in here. It's right there. So I will find out. Just send me an email in 2 days. If I don't have an answer, then I'll be very disappointed in myself. Do we have other questions about any of the course policies? I see your comment, Robbie, that it could be campus dependent, and I sure hope that's not the answer, because I want these policies to be the same for everybody. So Kathy's saying she did send a question. Let's scroll up. Oh, you don't have them. When you create an announcement, you don't have this toolbar that says all of these things you can do in the announcement.
The toolbar might just need to be expanded, right?
It can flatten. So yes, there's the 2 up arrows on the very right. Yep, see, and then you click it again and all your options come.
That should be the answer to that question. Okay, the sign-in sheet is posted in the chat. If you don't have access to the chat, just email Natalie, Misty, or I, and we will send you the link. If you have more questions that come up, just send us an email and or post them in the team, and we will work on addressing all of the questions you have. Again, we'll be in that team all semester long. My dean and I are presenting at 11 on instructor presence in online classrooms. So if you're interested in that, we're going to talk more about all kinds of different ways to make your class inviting and inclusive. So we hope to see you there. But if you have questions, just let us know. I'm going to leave because I have to go to the other session. But if Natalie and Misty stick around for a minute, they can answer any lingering questions that you have.
Sure, and I know someone asked about a copy of the presentation, and yes, we'll post, so at least by the end of these sessions, each session presentation will be posted in the channel for that particular session. So all the presentations will be there and at least a recording from each one. So thank you so much for joining us. The sign-in sheet link is there. It's also posted in the team, in the channel, and we're happy to answer any questions, or y'all go to the next session if you want.